this evening is the minutes for the last meeting. Is everybody happy to agree the minutes of the last meeting?
Agreed.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is apologies for absence. I'm aware of apologies from Simi Dayani and from Councillor David Deacon, who has arranged a substitute this evening. And any other apologies? No.
Apologies, please, on behalf of Councillor Barradell and Councillor Belinda Williams.
Thank you. Anyone aware of any further apologies? No. Okay, thank you. Any declarations of interest this evening? No. No? Okay. Anyone aware of any public participation? No? Okay. Item 5, consideration of any matter referred to the committee in relation to calling. Not aware of any call-ins? No? Okay. Item 6, action points from the previous meeting. So, any comments on any actions from the previous meeting? Any outstanding actions? No? Okay. So, we're going to just slightly change the agenda to move the work programme to after the scrutiny review, because Mark's here for a limited amount of time, or his colleagues here for a limited amount of time. So we're going to do item 8 next, which is the scrutiny review paper. So I'll hand over to Mark.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much. Could I just start by introducing Ian Parry, who's online, who will be helping with this presentation. Ian is the Director of Governance Services, as the slide shows, for the Centre for Governance and Scrutiny, who carried out this review for you. Ian, hopefully you can hear us. Could I just check in?
Yes, of course I can hear you. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Okay, I don't know if you can turn it off.
You want it turned up?
Yep, just a little bit. It didn't sound particularly loud. We'll carry on anyway whilst we try and sort that out. So in terms of backgrounds for members, the last review was carried out in 2019, and it's good practice to periodically review the scrutiny function to make sure it's as effective as possible. And as we know, scrutiny has a vital function to play in terms of policy, strategy, and project development and review. It works with the council, as we know, on the budget and other corporate strategies. And the overall function is to hold the executive to account, the cabinet to account for its key decisions. And we see this as a really key opportunity to ensure that scrutiny is making a real difference to the council. I'm going to hand you over to Ian, who's going to give you a bit of an overview in terms of the review carried out and his main findings. And then we're going to look at each of the recommendations that Ian has put forward. And on the back of that, I've developed some recommendations for consideration by the committee. So Ian, could I just ask you to talk through the review?
Yeah. Thanks, Mark. Thanks very much. Good evening, everyone, again. I wanted to take you through the... Can we go back to the previous slide, if you may? Thank you. That's perfect. Thank you very much. So the survey starts, the review starts with listening, observing and reading, in terms of listening to what you've got to tell us about how you feel scrutiny is working, what's your insight into that. And we conduct that through a couple of methods. One is through a survey, and we issued a survey out to 85 members and officers. We got 39 responses to that, which was about 25% of members, and a higher than average number of officers, 68%. We see that as a good sample, a representative sample, and valid therefore as part of the evidence acquisition. We also carried out 17 one-to-one conversations or interviews, 11 with the elected members, including the leader, deputy leader, a number of cabinet members and scrutiny chairs and deputies, and some of your corporate officers, including the chief executive and monitoring officer, 151 officer, etc. And we reviewed your agendas through a desktop analysis. We observed recorded meetings of your scrutiny committees. So we did, I think, a good sample across the organisation as to how scrutiny is working and what you're telling us you like and think could be improved. If we could go to the next slide. So the key findings we found was there is good officer support, and this is recognised by members and valued by members. That although there isn't a specific specific scrutiny officer, the expertise of scrutiny and support for members we felt was really high and commendable. Members' engagement is really good. Informal meetings, a good level of understanding, preparation and questioning, which is commendable again, and a willingness to embrace change, a willingness to think about how we could do things differently, how we can improve things, because there's always some scope for improvement. Not been to a council yet when that's not been the case. And clearly across the council, both officers and members really want to understand how they can improve and even to take best practice from elsewhere, not just from other councils, but from national guidance as well. So therefore, a firm commitment from members to link scrutiny to work issues that are of relevance to local people. And that is really important, that we're not just doing this for ourselves, we're doing this for local people, and we're understanding the issues which are important to them and bringing them in front of scrutiny. The final piece we were kind of looking at was, if we go to the next slide, yeah. The areas of focus for us were these 4 areas. Structure. Is the structure that you have in place right now in terms of the number of committees, the size of the committees, what committees are looking at, is that the right mix for you? Is that the right architecture to get scrutiny done in the council? Next, looking at culture, working relationships, levels of cooperation and understanding, support, etc. In those 2 areas, we saw no real reasons necessarily to change either structure or have any concerns about culture. So we saw those as reasonably stable and positive. In terms of structure, we'll come on to talk about that a little bit more detail, but overall, no recommendations will come forward about changing the committees in terms of the number of committees or the remit of committees. There are some changes that need to be made, and we'll come on to talk about those later. The working practices in terms of agenda packs, we thought perhaps reports could be improved. And again, we'll come on to talk about those a little bit more on the recommendations. And more perhaps task and finish, in-depth, external type stuff, bringing that community voice, bringing those things which are important to your residents into scrutiny and looking at those things. And also for members to be more engaged in how you decide what to scrutinise. So those topics that you decide you want to bring into your work programme, bring onto your agendas, perhaps more involvement from members. It's there right now, but we think that could be improved further. And finally, impact. That's the crucial thing, isn't it? What impact are you having? And we'd like to say that there is some impact. The fact that you exist anyway has an impact, but we think you could perhaps achieve more through that feedback loop, which we'll come on to talk about a little bit more detail, between what you recommend and the feedback that you get back from cabinet about what that's providing for you. So I want to come on to the recommendations then. The first one, back to structure. We've explored structure and detail, as I say. The only thing we would recommend there is the frequency of meetings perhaps could be changed to ensure that you're not meeting for the sake of it, but you have agendas which are focused and which allow you to scrutinise the things which are critical to the council and to your residents. We didn't think that the remits necessarily needs to be strengthened, but I think the remits need to be clearly articulated so that members understand the objectives of the committees that they sit on and what you're trying to achieve. Get back to you, Mark, if I may, for the actions.
Thank you. Yes. So in terms of actions, they're on the screen there. But one of the main ones we're looking at is to reduce the number of committees, scrutiny committees, to 5 main meetings each year, plus 1 budget meeting, with an optional second budget meeting if required in February that could be cancelled if we don't need it. And whilst there's less meetings, that certainly doesn't mean less scrutiny. So what we're looking to do is to have greater focus on thematic issues. At the moment, we feel that there's a lot of service information which comes before the committee. And we want to look at potentially different approaches to producing that information. One of which is to put some of these detailed performance reports onto a members portal. So there's an opportunity for members to review those in their own time and ask questions and receive answers through that portal. We are conscious that members still like to see some performance information, so what we're proposing is that 2 meetings a year are still allocated for performance reports. But this will free up a bit of time for the committee to deep dive into certain issues. So these might be things like delivery against corporate plan objectives, growing areas of customer demand, issues that complaints are showing are a real issue for the council. And we believe that slightly different approach will enable committee to have that deep dive approach. We want to realign cabinet meetings as well, so we have this continual flow of 5 meetings. So we propose to reduce the number of cabinet meetings, which is currently 11, down to 5. So we'll have this scrutiny, cabinet, council 5 times a year, flow throughout the year. One addition as well, in terms of audit, this review didn't touch on audit a great deal, but we want to look at just reducing the number of audit meetings from 6 to 5 as well, just to keep that consistent. Yeah.
Okay, so the next recommendations is still on the area of structure, and this is really about how perhaps greater integration across the committees, greater alignment across the committees could be achieved to ensure that they are aligned, that you're all pointing in the same direction, you all work into overall corporately the same kind of scrutiny objectives, and there isn't gaps or overlaps or duplication. And the best way to achieve that is through regular communication between the scrutiny chairs and adopting a default position where you share work programs, you see what each other's working on, you share innovations and insights so that you can build off each other and work together on certain things, that you don't work in isolation. The worst thing that can happen to scrutiny is that it starts to work in isolation and scrutiny committees start to see their own kind of siloed domain. What's most effective is when you get all of scrutiny working together in a total council approach. So we see also a potential link there with audit and with cabinet to involve them as well in this communication circle, so that everybody in that kind of triangulation way between officers, scrutiny, cabinet, audit are on the same page and are sharing information well, that allows that kind of alignment to develop and to strengthen. Back to you, Mark, for the recommendation detail.
Thank you. Yeah, so in terms of actions here, we want the scrutiny chairs and vice chairs to work very closely with us in terms of developing the work plans and work programme throughout the year. So what we're planning is one early work planning workshop each year, which will be in January, February time. But there will also be quarterly reviews throughout the year, so we can make sure that they're flexible enough to adapt throughout the year. And work plans will still come to meetings as they have done tonight for approval. So there's always that opportunity to add in new items as they arrive. Work plans will also be shared electronically on the members portal to give that oversight between scrutiny chairs and members, so each can see what type of items that they're bringing to ensure no duplication.
Okay, so the next recommendation looks at the relationships and culture piece. And what we're recommending here, based on our findings, is a development programme of awareness raising for both members and officers. As I said before, this is about developing total council approach to scrutiny, not scrutiny in isolation. And clearly what you do find, what we found in Dacorum, and we found in most councils that we talked to, is that there is a gap between the understanding of what scrutiny is trying to achieve between often members and officers. There's a kind of slight gap between the understanding of what scrutiny is trying to achieve. That needs to be brought together. So we're suggesting a development, kind of a training program for members and officers to increase awareness of scrutiny, understand what scrutiny is about in both directions, so that members know what scrutiny is trying to achieve and scrutiny know how to procure the support that they need from officers to be able to deliver what it is they are scrutinising and the objectives they've set themselves. Nothing radical there, but I think there are some actions which Mark's going to take you through.
Yeah, so we currently have members will be aware of an induction programme for members when they start their new term on scrutiny, and that will certainly continue because that's a valuable part of the initial training. But in addition, we're going to look to use the members portal to bring in more bite-sized training sessions to make them more accessible for members in smaller chunks rather than these long courses, which can sometimes be difficult at the start of terms when you're trying to learn lots of different areas. And that will give us an opportunity to do some either video training sessions or short written briefings as well, to keep members fully informed of any changes relevant to scrutiny process itself or to the areas that they scrutinise. And we hope that will give a much more flexible and accessible approach for members.
So then the final piece around relationships and culture then is about reviewing the development work plans, the development of work plans for each scrutiny committee. What scrutiny looks at is crucial, not just what it looks at, but what it chooses not to look at, to provide the space and headroom for it to actually focus on the, if you like, mission critical things. So what we're suggesting here is reviewing the process for developing the work plans for each scrutiny committee, which will engage members, officers, partners, and the public, in fact, to inform what could go into the work programme, but for members to prioritise topics that they want to consider and to do this in a prioritised, proportionate way. And this should allow some flexibility in that work programme to be able to bring things in that perhaps during the year, during that work programme period, become a priority and therefore should be factored in. Really important that it sets out this prioritisation using effective tools and methodology. And I know at the end of the work program, end of this pack, this agenda pack this evening, there is a suggested methodology for selecting and prioritising work. Go back to Mark for some actions, if I may.
Yeah, so some of the actions here, we're looking to have an annual call for work plan ideas from members, from scrutiny members as well as the wider council membership. And we also would like to go out to the public and ask what areas that they feel are important for them to scrutinise throughout the year. So we'll look to do that in January, February time each year. And then we'll have these annual work planning workshops with chairs and vice chairs to prioritise those ideas that come forward and try and create a proportionate work plan for the year. We've got to be careful not to overload scrutiny, but we feel that if we look at the 12-month ahead, we'll be able to balance that out appropriately. And we've developed a work plan selection tool to help prioritise those plans, for a way of scoring the ideas that come forward. So it doesn't mean that we won't see those ideas before scrutiny. We're just determining when they might best fit in the year or the year after, if we don't get an opportunity to get to them for any year.
Okay, so a couple of recommendations on working practice, and this is about how can scrutiny, in a sense, declutter a lot of the information that it receives on its agendas. So you may find on your agenda some items which are perhaps repetitive or for information, or may well be items which are being showcased to you, or updates, etc. Can you add value to those subjects, to those topics? And sometimes that's debatable. So the question is, how do you reduce the amount of information that comes in front of you, and ensure that there's enough space for scrutiny to act in a scrutiny-focused way that's trying to deliver impact and adding value. So to do that, one of the tools is to take some of that stuff offline and move into an information digest for all elected members to access an easy, accessible way, so that you're not left out of the information loop, but you've got an opportunity to actually dip into those things and study the stuff you want to study in more detail, which leaves your agendas and your time for scrutiny freed up to be able to do that more dedicated and focused work. Mark's got some actions, I think, there.
Yeah, we've mentioned the members portal, and that'd be the key way that we'll use to hold some of the information that members can view in their own time. It might be, excuse me, the performance reports, service briefings that we want to get before members. As I mentioned as well, training videos and training records, where members will be able to view what courses they've been on, which ones they've still got to attend in terms of some of the mandatory training. And as I said as well earlier, the question and answer forum, an opportunity to submit questions, make sure they get through to the right officers and receive a response through the portal. Nearly there.
So the second part of this recommendation is around working practice, is about the information that you receive and how you receive it. There's often complaints, not just in your council, but in every council, that the reports you receive are perhaps too weighty, perhaps too detailed, unnecessarily so. So this is about perhaps reviewing how reports are produced for scrutiny in a more bespoke way. And that needs some collaboration between scrutiny and officers that produce that information for you. And also built onto that, how you can get that kind of core knowledge that you need to be able to be better prepared for scrutiny. So this is about what information you receive, and does that come in a report format? Does that come in a briefing? Does that come in a kind of, a masterclass or something that allows you to gather that core information, as well as having the report in front of you to be able to do good work? And it's a mix of those things that allows you to do that. So there are some recommendation action points there.
Yeah, so we're keen to just review the current template for reports. We're trying to avoid lengthy reports that members see, only relevant detail that they really want to view. So we're very keen to work with chairs and vice chairs on developing those reports, using the current format, but tinkering with it to make sure it works for the committee and you're seeing the information and the depth and level of information that you require for proper scrutiny. We'll also look at the structure of performance reports to make sure that they're really focused on those key performance indicators that you might want to see. At times we find some of the performance reports are not so much about performance, but they're kind of things that the service has been up to. And we feel we can take that information away and put that on the portal to allow the committee really to focus on the key performance service improvements that they might want to see and scrutinise. Final
recommendation is about impact. This is really the crucial point, isn't it? what impact is scrutiny having, and how do we kind of rate that? So the product of scrutiny, the output of scrutiny, the thing with which we can measure ourselves by, is the ability to make compelling recommendations and how those have impact on the authority. So your recommendations will go to cabinet. Cabinet will consider them, and hopefully will either take account of them, incorporate them in their thinking or their decision making and policy making, or not. But either way, you need feedback on how those recommendations have landed, what they like and dislike, or whatever, so that there can be a continuous improvement loop in all of that. So scrutiny's impact can be incrementally improved through that feedback loop. Silence is not good enough in a sense. If scrutiny isn't getting that feedback, how do you know if you're having any impact at all? You do need that relationship with cabinet in terms of what product you're delivering and how effective it's been. So there are some recommendations there.
Yes, so we're going to look at committee agendas and make sure you are getting that feedback. So it'd be a standing item on each agenda that comes before you, so you can really see the impact of your recommendations, how they were taken forward, how they changed policy projects, and make sure we've got that continual loop so you can assess the good work that you all do. We also noted through the review that there was not so much involvement from either the public or service experts from outside of the council who we might be able to bring in, who can really assist with the debate, particularly when we're doing that deep dive into certain subject areas. So we're keen to try and develop that and bring that forward in future reports and scrutiny work plans. So that's the end of the presentation. I appreciate there's quite a lot in there, a fair few changes, but we're happy to open up and take any questions any members have got.
Any questions?
I have some questions.
Councillor Symington.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much for the presentation. I wanted to ask a few things. You mentioned about there being a gap between what scrutiny is trying to achieve and the perception of it. Could you flesh out a little bit how that manifested itself when you did your interviews and your surveys?
Ian, obviously as you were responsible for the overview and review, do you think you could take that one?
Yeah, of course. There's always a kind of inconsistency across when we talk to members and officers about, what's the role and purpose and what is scrutiny achieving. And there's often an inconsistency in the answers that we receive. So it's just simply making sure that everybody's focused on the same outcomes, the same objectives. What are we here to do? What are we trying to achieve? And is that shared? It's not a difficult thing to think about. It's often a difficult thing to achieve. And it isn't a kind of a criticism, it's an observation that actually I think people recognize that, if that inconsistency exists, achieving an outcome can be difficult. And when we looked at some of your meetings and observed some of your meetings and looked at some of your meetings agendas and reports and minutes, it was clear that not in every case you had a clear objective or a clear outcome that we could recognize. There was an interesting conversation, but not always an interesting outcome, not a compelling recommendation. Now, I understand that recommendation is not always possible, but that's what our objective should be. So it's just clearly tidying up that we're all together and we're all in the same place, we're all focused in the same direction.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm happy to wait for others, but I've got some more questions.
Did anyone else put their hand up? Yeah.
Yeah, just a quick one. I had the privilege of listening to this last night, so I did ask my questions. Just one point. Mark, on the question of training for for members coming at the beginning of the term, all members, and I know there is benefit, you have benefits, of this training, but is it actually necessary for all members to undergo this intensive training again?
I certainly would say yes. A lot of members come in with no experience of how the council works, what legislation they might have to comply with, things like data protection, freedom of information, health and safety laws that we've all got to abide by. And they won't necessarily understand our processes around budgets, constitution, how we make decisions, all that type of thing. So there's so many areas that we feel that they need to cover, that a real detailed training programme is required, particularly at the outset, but ongoing as things change throughout your term, to ensure that you're fully kept up to date and can do your role properly.
Sorry, I'm referring to existing members. That's what I mean by, when I say all members, I'm not talking in terms of age. I'm talking about existing members.
Well, look, obviously each term brings in some experienced members who have been councillors before, but also some new members. But because so it's kind of a mix, we've got to ensure that we're catering for everybody, catering for those who don't have any experience. So we really have to take them back to basics. But also things change so frequently throughout a term. So even if you've got an experienced member, we feel it's still really important that they receive that training as a refresher each time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
I do have some questions. Did you want to go first, Councillor Singleton?
Thank you. I didn't really get a chance to follow up on my answer, the answer I received. So thank you for that. I couldn't see in the report, and I guess I'm speaking a little bit from experience here as well, how many recommendations were actually made and taken forward from scrutiny meetings. How many of those were actually adopted by or resulted in any form of change of policy? In my how long have I been a councillor? Anyway, it's 5.5 years. I've only actually been able myself to make one recommendation to a chair to get something added to the agenda and a report, and actually that was very useful, but it is only one example. And I haven't seen many other people be in a position really to amend an agenda or add anything to a work plan. I'm very supportive of to removing some of the statutory performance figures because I think that we spend too much time just looking and asking about those and not doing what you're absolutely recommending, and I commend you recommending a much deeper dive into policy issues and the way things should be should develop going forward, which brings me on to the involvement of the public. My only time, and this related to the item that I asked to be brought forward, which was electric vehicle charging points, I encouraged somebody that I'd worked with in my ward to come and speak about it. He was a member of the public, he was very knowledgeable, but he was actually made to feel incredibly unwelcome, and he was allowed to speak for a couple of minutes and that was it. So I think and I absolutely welcome the involvement of the public, but I think it needs to be thought through how we make them feel welcome and included in this environment. And just while I'm on the involvement of other people, I would, and this is more of a question, it's a statement and a question, in terms, you said you interviewed the leader, the deputy leader and the chairs of the overview and scrutiny committees. I guess it would have probably been useful to speak to some wider people because they're sort of marking their own homework about how they're doing it. That's the statement. in terms of the feeling that you got, and I say this as we have nobody here from the Cabinet, you know, what kind of engagement, we need the engagement of the leader and the Cabinet to make people feel who attend these meetings as members to feel that there's any value to them, because we can do all the scrutiny we like, but if it's not taken on board by the Cabinet and the leader, then we're going through the motions. So, you know, what was your sense of since you interviewed them, what was your sense of their engagement with this? And how do we make sure that what we bring forward out of this, following the changes which I support, but that they're taken forward and adopted by that group?
Okay, should I take those, Mark?
Yeah, go for it, and I can pick up a few as well, but yeah.
Thank you. So certainly from the interviews that we held, and it wasn't exclusively with, you know, with lead members and cabinet members, etc., and chairs, there was a cross section. What we always try to achieve is to take a cross section across the council. So members who are not office holders, as well as people who are chairs and vice chairs, etc. So there is a fairly representative sample, and clearly that's part of the reason why we issue the survey, to make sure that everybody's got a voice, everybody's got an opportunity to contribute. What we did find, which is good to know, pleasing to know, is that cabinet, corporate leaders, members, chairs, almost everyone we spoke to felt there was opportunity to improve and was supportive of improvement. I understand that the report, as we issued our final report, is well received by cabinet and corporate officers, etc. So I think, generally speaking, within the council, it's been widely well received. Clearly, we're open to feedback and ideas. In terms of involvement in the public, that's a really important aspect of this. You already notably allow public to address committees, and that's proper and managed, and that's quite familiar in councils. But what's less familiar is inviting experts or service users or others who've got a story to tell, to come and inform scrutiny, a bit like a select committee would invite witnesses. So you get the user experience, you get the expert input, and you also got the member insight. And we don't forget that members have unique insight in terms of what's happening in your wards, which are often different in different parts of the borough. But that user and that expert input is really important. What's really important, though, is when they come, they're respected and they're welcomed and they're treated nicely and they're encouraged to speak and listen to, and what they have to say is received, even if you disagree with it. It's part of the evidence gathering and input that scrutiny can build on and add value to what they're doing. So I think some of the stuff is done at the moment, but it's not done perhaps enough. We also think that a lot of what scrutiny does in terms of its impact and making recommendations, this isn't about recommending stuff to go onto the agenda, but about recommending as a committee, having had your discussions, having hopefully received input from witnesses and service users, that you develop compelling recommendations that you could put to cabinet later, to say, we've gathered this evidence, we've listened to these people, we've understood this issue really, really well, and we now want to reflect those to you to see if those can help you in terms of decision making and policy development. Where scrutiny really adds value is where it improves policy, it improves decision making, it improves service delivery through the scrutiny that you're undertaking. That's where it adds value. That's where you get the joy and pleasure of being members of a scrutiny committee. And that can be achieved if we ensure that what we're trying to do in the meeting is not just to have an interesting debate, but actually to craft something out of it that will help to shape things. It's often called pre-scrutiny, pre-decision scrutiny, where you're looking at things which the cabinet are going to make decisions on in the future, and you're having some input on those now to try and help to shape them and provide extra insight from Scrutiny's point of view. It's more heads around the table, more heads on that problem solving or policy development that the council is going through. I hope that's helpful. I don't know, Mark, if there's anything you wanted to add.
I think there was just a question around the recommendations from the report and whether they were adopted or not. This presentation outlines all of the recommendations. We have taken forward each of them with an action plan, so none of them were dismissed and they're all taken forward.
Sorry, can I just come back? So that wasn't my question.
Okay.
Thank you, that's useful to know. And my question was, historically, in terms of the analysis that you did, how often did you find that recommendations were amended as a result of this scrutiny process? And how many, even if the recommendation was amended as a result of a meeting such as this, how many of the times was that, did that influence the decision of the cabinet?
Sorry, Councillor. Our review didn't find evidence that there was very much of that going on, to be honest, and that's why we're making this recommendation to you, that there is potentially a lack of a system that allows you to monitor and record and track what it is you're doing and what outputs you're making, what recommendations you're making, and what happens to them afterwards. And as we said, that loop doesn't really exist in any meaningful way. It exists in an informal way, but it's very difficult to track and monitor. So therefore, we couldn't see that. We couldn't get a line of sight into that. And that's why we came forward with that recommendation that perhaps this is an area we'd like to think about strengthening.
Well, I think that's a very positive recommendation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Banks and then Mark.
Thank you, Chair. Mark, if I could just ask, where did this review come from? Has this come from scrutiny chairs, or is this externally put upon us, or is it something that officers led?
It's, as I said in the introduction, it's good practice to periodically review scrutiny function, and the last time we did this was in 2019. So it was identified by officers that it would be a good opportunity to look at it again. You're supposed to do it sort of every 5 years following best practice. So we will sort of well due a service review.
The point about the engagement with public, I have noticed that there's been, over years we have moved towards particularly using social media to publicise, public engagement. What do you think about? What would you like us to do? What sort of response do we get, generally speaking? Have you got a feel for the sort of response we get from residents of Decorum when we push out a request for them to participate or engage with us on high-level policy? Budget, I think, is out there at the moment, and leisure is the other one that comes immediately to mind. Do we ever get a great response, or is that something we really need to work on as members with our constituents?
To be honest, I couldn't give you numbers on all those different areas because they'd all fall in different areas of the team. But I know we've been really pushing the consultation portal and the way we engage with residents on some of these key strategies and policies. And my understanding is it's pretty positive. You would probably always hope to get more, but it's something we've certainly been pushing and we'll continue to do so. And that's one of the ideas here, and it's something we've not used for scrutiny to go out to the public, but we want to push that and try and promote it and get some feedback.
Sure. Sorry, Chair, if I may.
Yes.
I should have started off by thanking you for this report, and I personally am very happy to take it forward. I think it's an excellent suggestion. My reservation is, to me, it hinges very much on the quality of the portal that is put together for members, the training, the digest that you've mentioned, and I guess the annual quarterly workshops that you're planning to have with chairs and vice chairs, which I guess will depend on the experience and the strength of our scrutiny chair and vice chairs. So to me, it seems a big ask for us to agree to take this step when we haven't had sight of any of the content of either the portals, the digests or the workshops. So not wanting to hold the process up, I wonder if there is any plan in place to review the change and that it has actually worked.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, obviously in terms of development, there's quite a lot of officer time that's required to develop these, the portal. So we needed that steer from members first before we went ahead and did it, and check in with members to make sure you were content with the principles we're putting forward. So that was kind of the first step. But certainly in terms of review, yes, we will build that in. We will look to probably review every 6 months to see how things are going, but we'll be continually meeting with chairs and vice chairs and getting feedback from committee members as to how the changes have taken forward and whether they have improved things and whether there's further changes required to continually improve. So yes, it'll be a continual process. This is kind of a start of the change, but we want to keep reviewing and improving.
So just finally, was any consideration given to, even if we didn't change the frequency of meetings or cabinet, would there still not have been an advantage to having these portals and digests? And then if they worked, then reduce the committee meetings down to 5, 6 per year? It just seems to me, you know, very officer-led, and we haven't even had sight of what the format might be.
I think that Annie might like to comment on this, but the recommendations obviously follow feedback from key members who we've talked to throughout this process. And we reviewed meeting agendas, how many reports that members were seeing. We looked at the timings, how long the meetings lasted across the 3 scrutinies. And we felt that the business that we're going to put forward for the committee can certainly be dealt with within the proposed timetable of 5 main meetings each year. So we wanted to put a package together that we feel can work. And obviously the timetable for committees is approved each year, so we can always review it. There's opportunities to add in meetings if we really need them. On the back of feedback, we've actually built in some contingency cabinet meetings as well, in case they're needed. So we'll have 5 main ones and 5 contingency cabinets if we really need them for any urgent business which falls outside of those 5 meetings. So we think the package strikes the right balance at the moment, and we can look at it and we can see how business is going through and how effective it's been, and then review. But we think it's about right.
If I could perhaps support that, Chair, if I may.
Yes.
Would that be okay? I mean, based on the review findings and based on our experience of councils elsewhere, and we do probably 15 similar reviews to this across councils across the UK, across England, in a typical year. So we see a lot of councils and we see a lot of scrutiny activity. So what we're recommending here is a suite of recommendations to effect change, to improve scrutiny. So this was never set out to be any kind of inspection. It's an improvement review. It says it's intended to support you and to advise you on how you could get more out of what you're doing. So it's a suite of changes. Now, some of those things can be done overnight. You could decide to do those things tomorrow morning. Some could be done in a couple of weeks or months, quite early, quite short-term things. Some might take a little bit longer to work out, and some might even take, you know, a constitution change. I don't think any of the recommendations do, by the way, but there is a kind of scale to this that, you know, doesn't all have to be done at once. It can be done over a period of time, but we would recommend that all of it is at least considered and perhaps actioned. And you can always come back to it, you know, and 6 months, 12 months later and say, well, we like that, but we'd like to strengthen it or do it slightly differently, or it actually hasn't worked and we'd like to therefore, you know, think of something else. This is not a perfect science, but those are the recommendations based on our expertise and experience and what we think will help you and the council to get more out of what you're doing.
Thank you.
And I agree with that. Can I just ask, if you're looking at putting in contingency meetings, sort of shadow dates for Cabinet, are you doing the same for the scrutiny committees?
No, we don't feel that that's required at the moment. I mean, with this programme, you can have a scrutiny meeting every other month. You can have a cabinet every other month. The programmes, the policies, the reports, the deep dives that will come through to scrutiny will be planned a long time in advance. They have quite a long lead-in period, obviously, through officers as we develop these things. So we feel that is more than enough. It gives everybody a little bit more space to develop ideas, make sure the reports are right before they come to committee. So we're not planning on having additional scrutinies built in. There is always that opportunity to bring them in as extraordinary meetings if we need them. But again, I think that'd be one that we would review if required, but initially start with this plan. To give the consistency, because we wanted to have five scrutinies, 5 cabinet, 5 council throughout the year, and without moving that around. The cabinets were there just for real urgent business if required, but we hope that won't be needed.
Surely real urgent business will have come through the scrutiny process for us to make recommendations to Cabinet.
It would, and we can always, if it is required, and we don't believe it will be, looking at the business that comes through the council, and we can always call those urgent meetings if we really needed to, or we could look at developing contingency scrutinies as well if we feel it's a problem. But early on, we didn't feel that was needed. We didn't want to clog up the diary with too many contingencies, which then got to keep cancelling all the time, just because it might be confusing for members.
Thank you, Chair.
I'll move on to Councillor Stevens.
I was hoping I was being able not to say anything tonight, but in view of what this meeting has developed, can I just reiterate what I said when we were at SPAY? I welcome the proposals that are coming through in this recommendation, because in the time that I've been a councillor here, one of the things that we found when we first started in scrutiny is that it is not strategic. We have been in meetings where the discussions that have taken place very largely represent the sort of discussions that we have at a parish council, and they're not strategic. So I'm hoping that what is coming through will be much more strategic and therefore much more effective. Coming back to what Councillor Adeleke was saying, although you might be a councillor for 10 years, I'm a firm believer that refreshing your training periodically is always good, because you build on what your experience is, you share it, and you may learn even a bit more. So put up with the training process. It's good for us.
I will try.
Okay, thank you. So the decision you'd like us to make tonight is, are we happy to agree?
Yes, I'm seeking feedback from members, which I've been noting down, and that will be fed through to Cabinet, who will be considering the report at the end of the month.
Okay, so there's no specific decision to be made.
To note and provide feedback.
I'll just ask you, sorry, I've just been looking at the recommendation too. Just can I clarify for my own benefit, perhaps others who may not be quite as clear. In terms of the chairs and vice chairs getting together, I get the impression from the earlier part of the report it's going to be a sort of quarterly type review, and then subsequently it talks about engaging chair of audit and cabinet, and I'm just wondering if that's going to be some sort of formal engagement, or if that's going to be more just they'll look at the work programmes and say, well, hang on a moment, there's something missing here. I just think it might be useful. I'm not wishing to add another tier. It might be useful to formalise at least perhaps 1 or 2 meetings a year with Cabinet and with Chair of Audit, just to make sure that they're all on the same page in the direction that they want the scrutiny committees to go.
Yeah, certainly the Chair of Audit will link in to make sure they're aware of everything that's coming through scrutiny as well. Portfolio holders are individually briefed in terms of what's coming to scrutiny, so they receive those briefings with officers on a monthly basis anyway. So I kind of feel that's probably sufficient, and they would certainly be aware of what's coming forward. But so I wouldn't necessarily think we need to add anything in. There is a lot that goes on. There's not on a formal plan, but it's arranged through officers.
Thank you, Chair.
And I think I'd just like to make a point. I think it's important to recognise that although there is a role for chair and vice chair, there's lots of members on the committee, so there needs to be a way for their voices to also be represented well by the chairs and vice chairs. So I don't know if some space could be added to agendas for wider member voices as well.
Yes, definitely. I mean, there is always an item on work plan approval, and I think maybe that's a training opportunity for chairs to really call on members and have that proper discussion as to what's coming forward. It sometimes tends to go through on the nod without a full discussion, so maybe that's something that could be developed.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you. We'll move on to the next item. So we'll thank you to Ian as well for your attendance.
Yeah.
Chair.
Thank you. Thank you for your report.
Good night, everyone. Good night, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so when I say next item on the agenda, we'll move back to item 7, which is the work programme. I'll take it as read. Any comments about the work programme? Help?
I'd like to make
Oh, okay, Councillor Symington.
I'd just like to comment that it does not go beyond March this year.
That's always the case. We haven't had any requested items for next year, but the new programs, there's nothing on them at the moment, so we've not had any items to be requested at the moment.
Okay. Sorry, but we're being encouraged to look further ahead, and if we only have a schedule that goes 2 months ahead, that's
Okay, I'll pass on to Natasha.
how can we change
I'll
that?
pass that on to Natasha, and she might have some items that she's got that she's just not given to me. I'll chase it up with the PA.
Sorry, I'm not trying to push that off on an officer. I'm trying to follow on from the discussion that we've just had. That actually, how we have this agenda item which we're meant to be discussing, and I'm not asking that it's already brought forward to us. I think it's on all of us as well to be putting items forward. But obviously, it's helpful if we know what's being proposed. If I can ask a question, how does the cultural strategy sit in housing?
If I just respond to that question then, I think this is to do with a change in the terms of reference. So I think the culture strategy would actually sit somewhere else. I think it would sit within Spain now.
Did that change recently then?
I think it related to previous terms of reference for this meeting, where it would have been covered here. So I think your point is a very fair one. My understanding is that would feed through to the Display Committee rather than this committee now.
I'm going to check out the...
Chair, while we were looking at the work programme, I noticed at the bottom of the list, there's an item here about add climate change, bracket from October minutes. I would have thought that would
Yeah, so then
sit.
when someone gives me a date, it will then go on to the next one. So that's the only thing basically that I've got at the moment, but yeah.
I would have thought that would have been coordinated better with SPAY. Unless there's a specific.
I haven't been told anything, whether to remove it or I haven't been told anything, so I can't really comment on that.
Chair, I can help with that. I think the request was specifically around the work we're doing within housing in relation to climate change. So it would be of particular interest to this committee. So it's specifically around the work we're doing on housing initiatives and climate change, particularly around our own council housing stock.
Yeah.
I was just going to chime in with the observation that what you're talking about here, I think, is a very good example of why trying to bring the chairs of the committees together.
Yeah.
Because I think what happens at the moment is somebody will come to me and say, "Can we have this on the work programme for F&R?" I can go off and arrange that, or I might say, "Oh, it's probably not a finance and resources thing." So it's almost like me going, "Well, it doesn't sit at my committee, it's a different one," rather than sitting down and saying, well, where are we actually going to have this? So that's one of the recommendations I did quite like.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Yeah, if we're allowed to make suggestions, can I make a suggestion that we have a report on empty homes in the borough?
Thank you.
Yeah, could I just clarify? Are you looking for a report on private sector empty homes?
All empty homes, yes, including private sector.
All empty homes?
Well, all, yes, because presumably there are some.
You already
in our
received
own-
the information
yeah.
on council empty homes through the performance
Yeah.
report. But yeah, private sector empty homes is what you're looking for.
Thank you. Councillor Stevens.
Me and my bonnet's coming on, not just on empty homes. Do we know how many Airbnb properties we now have in the borough? That is displacing rental type properties.
I don't know the answer to that. I'd find out for you. I'd find out for you.
You'll find out how to get it rather than you can guarantee you'll find out the answer.
I will find out what the position is, Chair.
Thank you.
And we'll include it as an action from the minute.
Very not a true politician.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we will move back on to.
Sorry, Chair. Still on work program. Please correct me if I'm wrong. I understand Fiona Jump has left. Is she still here?
She's left.
She's still here?
She's left. She's left.
Okay, because she's due to give us something in Q3, and if she's not here.
It could be that the young lad, what was...
So that should now say Claire Dempsey, who is taking on that role currently. You're quite right, Councillor. Fiona left us before Christmas. Claire Dempsey is now covering that role, so she will be the designated officer.
She's working with my daughter now, so I know she's.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll move on to item 9, which is the building safety update. Obviously, again, we'll take it as the report is read. So just any key updates to share?
Sorry, Chair, I've actually done a brief presentation and I will keep it brief. Bear in mind the scrutiny reviews are through shorter papers. I've produced a little slideshow. Can I go very quickly? Is that okay? Yes. Thank you. So good evening, everyone. I'm Ricky Lang. I'm Head of Safe Homes. The update today is off the back of the Building Safety Act, which was sent in 2022. This saw the major effects coming in 2023. So 24 was our first year of having to deal with all the new legislative requirements. So I thought quite a good opportunity to bring it to the committee today to discuss. So I will rattle through some slides. So apologies if it's quick. It's just like I say, an update to where we are. These are the key requirements for takeaway for us as a landlord with a retained social housing stock. So the first one you have to do is register properties over 18 metres. So we looked at all of our stock, and they actually currently have 5 buildings over 18 metres, Gay Tower, 2 at Pelham Court, Kirwan Court and Fennycroft Road. So they were all registered in advance of the deadline in October. Those buildings also have to have building safety cases, so very robust, also live documents that show how we are keeping our residents safe. So there's lots of information there. We're working with a consultant called Oakleaf to make sure our building safety cases are fit for purpose and up to date. Door inspection, so again, any building over 11 metres, so we have 15 buildings over 11 metres, we have to inspect all flat entrance doors annually and all communal doors quarterly. So that was quite an onerous task on us and how we're managing that. And then Gateway 2, which is a new requirement, so any works you carry out to our high-rise buildings has to go through the Gateway 2 portal, which is signed off by the Building Safety Regulator, which is quite onerous and not without its difficulties. Appreciate that's quite small, so I will just try and speak quickly. I'll share these slides afterwards as well. That's around internal governance. So again, what else did we do to make sure we had internal governance in place, that we were adhering to the new legislations? We do have a building and resident safety management board. We have SLT in place, obviously, where they receive a monthly report around assurance and compliance. We've also got new data systems, which we'll come on to later. Again, very much reliant on data to demonstrate compliance. Got some really good systems in place, and that governance driven by data working together hopefully gives everyone confidence we're in a really strong position, which we believe we are. Doing some work with TPAS. So TPAS are resident engagement experts, and this is a crucial requirement of the Building Safety Act, is you have to have building safety resident engagement strategies for those high-risk buildings. It's new, it's not just new to us, it's new to the whole country. So we partnered up with TPAS, I say they are the experts in resident engagement, working really closely with them in a very innovative project, and we are the market leaders in that. We are developing a toolkit that we can actually take forward to make sure that each building has a bespoke resident engagement strategy that reflects the wants and needs of the people living in that particular building. And that's coming to fruition now. We're taking that through to HSLT in February, SLT in March, potentially something we could add as a future agenda item. Mentioned software. So yeah, we've had to purchase some new software to help us demonstrate compliance. Again, there's 4 different things. I won't go into detail on it, but Geometra helps us do our fire risk assessments, Propeller helps us do our door inspections, and Risk Flag helps us do our building safety cases. So some challenges, recruitment and retention. The fire safety industry is in huge demand, making sure we've got qualified and accredited people. So we look to upskill existing staff, which is probably slightly cheaper than trying to bring in consultants. Budgets, again, is high demand, cost of doors, cost of labour, everything's going up. So we're trying to make sure we procure competitively and get value for money still. Resident behaviours, I suppose it's a tough one for us, because whilst we can do everything we now power to make those buildings safe, residents still have free choice. And we're seeing increasing challenges around lithium batteries, for instance, in vapes, in electric bikes. They are flammable, they do go up. So again, it's how we communicate with those residents, what they can do to keep themselves and their neighbours safe. It's not just down to us. Data, again, touched on that. So we are doing a big data migration piece to smooth out that process. And legislation, whilst the threshold for high-risk buildings is currently 18 metres, the expectation is it's going to be reduced to 11 metres. But we are already looking at buildings over 11 metres and treating them in the same way we do our high-risk buildings, so we'll be ready for that change. What's happening in 2025? Again, some key highlights for us. So we are recruiting an additional safe home survey to help with our door inspections, looking at person-centred fire risk assessments in our high-risk buildings, safety management systems. Again, it's a comprehensive document. Pelham Court, we've got some fire safety upgrades due in Pelham Court, as we do in Fennycroft and Kilner. The TPAS resident engagement toolkit, and training, again, so making sure that our current staff are upskilled and competent to carry out their roles.
Thank you.
So yes,
Thank
please,
you
any
very
questions?
Well, we do fall asleep, didn't we?
Any questions? Thank you. Councillor, thanks. I think was first.
So when you say staff, who are we talking about? Housing staff?
Yes, that's at the
Housing tenancy officers or?
So it's a combination. So the Safe Homes team, so my team, which are kind of responsible for the statutory compliance. So we've got compliance officers, we've got building safety surveyors, but through other exercises, making sure that through the CIH, that would increase competency of our housing staff. But we're focusing mainly on making sure the door inspection is the main thing for us, because we want competent people carrying these door inspections. You can outsource it, but there's a cost to that. You lose control over it. So we're focusing on trying to upskill our existing staff, making sure they've got the training at that right level so we can demonstrate competency with the regulator.
And I have just one other unrelated question, if I can take another turn.
If Councillor Angelique is happy with that, okay, yeah.
Carry on?
Yeah.
Peppered in your presentation and also in the report, that there's new now I'm rushing, I can't think of the word. No, there are, don't stop. Software.
Yes.
And and obviously I can see obviously the need for further training, what have you.
Mhm.
Can you assure members that that has all been resourced, it's all been financed, that it's in the budget, or is this something is still seeking approval?
All the software systems we've used have gone through the financial approval channels and are in place, and we obviously work with the ICT team to make sure that we want to reduce the different packages. We are working towards a single system of compliance, which is the MRI asset, where all of our servicing information, so it's not just fire safety, it's gas compliance, it's asbestos, it's Legionella, it's electrical. So we're building that, but in the interim, we've had to go and procure some off-the-shelf solutions that help us on the door inspections in particular and our fire risk assessment. So those licenses are in place, they've gone through the internal governance. So yeah, we're using that, but the idea in the future is we'll come away and try and build one single system of compliance.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And Councillor Kaliki, did you have a question?
It's a good one. Thank you very much, Mark, for your presentation. Just looking through the report and listening to your presentation, it appears as if you will need a lot of people working for you. Are you sufficiently staffed to cope with what you've got on your plate? And secondly, again, I look at the report. Can some of these jobs that you do be undertaken by AI, is called artificial intelligence or something like that? Is this something you are thinking of introducing? If you've got the budget for it.
So on the first question on resource, I say we've just recently recruited an additional surveyor to help us with the door inspections. We think we're okay, but part of the HTIP programme, there's the target operating models within HTIP that is looking at the whole of housing, but looking at that model and the current requirements for the legislation, we're okay, but we are constantly horizon scanning. So if, as I say, that threshold changes from 18 to 11 metres, we think we're okay. If all of a sudden there's a different definition of high-risk buildings, then we might need to look at that resource. But the legislation where it is, where we think it's going, we think we're well resourced to manage that requirement. AI is a good question. I don't think I know the answer to it, to be honest with you, but so the legislation is new. The industry is constantly evolving. Me and my team, we go to seminars, we go to events, lots of networking opportunities. So the conversations are out there, but yeah, we'll probably won't be the leaders in the industry on that one. We'll probably learn from others and see where the actual market's going. Thank you.
Thank you. I think Mark Penny put his hand up there, Mark. He went yellow. Mark, did you want to say something?
Yeah, thanks, Joe. It was just to add to that, really, to say that in addition to Ricky's team, we've also proactively working with contractors. So Aaron Services, for example, who access all of our properties to do their gas servicing, are also accessing non-gas properties, i.e. the electrical properties, to do smoke alarm checks and carbon monoxide checks. So in addition to Ricky's team, we have got proactive engagement with contractors to increase our footprint, really, and to increase the efficiency. So as Ricky's alluded to, we have recently staffed up quite well, and we will continue to do that and support that through the appropriate channels. But I think it's important to note that we have got strong relationship with contractors who are working in our properties anyway to increase our vision. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Symington.
Yes, thank you very much for your presentation. I found it really interesting. Oh, my screen's gone blank. But I guess so I was also going to ask about the costs, because obviously it does put more cost on the council. And I don't know if they have been quantified or if they're in the budget and there's a line somewhere which you could point us to. That would be really helpful. Presumably there's a balance between the statutory obligations that are current and the ones that you, as you say, horizon scanning that you see coming down the road, and there's been a decision to try, this is what I'm understanding, there's been a decision to meet those early in terms of bringing the criteria down to 11-metre buildings, which obviously sounds like a very sensible thing to do, but presumably adds to the cost for the council. Is that going to be covered by rent? I think rent increases are capped. If that doesn't cover it, do we have to, how is it going to be funded? And then I guess as a sort of wider point, which isn't really relevant to you, Ricky, so because thank you, I found this very interesting, but following on from our earlier discussion, the recommendation on this is just to note the report. So it is really interesting and it's great that we can have this discussion, but I'm not sure how we can, apart from asking you questions about that report, I'm not sure that we're actually adding anything else. It's helping all of us understand what the council's doing. But to our earlier question, and it's a shame that Mark has gone and everybody else, but Darren, you're here, so I'm to put this on you. I think, you know, as I said, really, I'm sure all of us have found it really interesting and it's really good to know, but how can we either scrutinise what you're doing and have any real input into it? I don't know, I mean, that's an interesting point. Thank you.
Can I just make a few comments about that? First, on the finance side. All of the commitments we have around building safety, including all of the compliance work we do in terms of health and safety to all of our council homes, is covered within our housing budgets and is funded from our rental income, which, as you rightly say, is capped in line with government guidance. So we bring the Housing Revenue Account Business Plan here each year for oversight at this meeting, but we have made financial provision for these things in our budgets. And the requirements to the Building Safety Act are additional requirements on landlords, but they're requirements on all landlords. So I can give the assurance they are contained within our budgets, and they are fully funded. There will also be requirements around capital works, and again, those are improvement works which will come through our budgets as well. And again, those are funded too. But we regularly review that, and that's part of our planned maintenance programmes. In terms of your wider challenge about the role of scrutiny, I think it's a very interesting question. And I felt a bit sorry for my colleagues here going after the scrutiny presentation with their 2 items. I thought they'd get lots of questions about why you bring these items. And I guess...
it's really, I'm just going to be really clear, it is really, really interesting. And I think, I don't know if I speak for everybody, but I'm sure we do want to know what you're doing. But I'm not sure how it fits with where we're going with scrutiny and how we're adding value.
So one of the observations I would have is that at the Grenfell inquiry, when they looked at building safety, it was felt the council, its elected members, had insufficient oversight of what their housing service was doing in terms of building safety, and that members hadn't had the opportunity to have sessions like this and to ask questions. So it's important that where we have key aspects of our service that we provide for our residents, that member committees like this have that opportunity to have that information and to ask questions. I think going forward in the context of the presentation we've had earlier, I think it will be in the form of a themed review more. So it might be sort of health and safety of all of our assets. It might be a much broader health and safety theme where committees might come together to look at how those aspects impact on the services that they have oversight of. So it'd be much more strategic in that sense. But what we've done tonight is bring you a paper on building safety because of their new responsibilities, and it's really important you have oversight of them. And a paper we're going on to around repairs because it's the biggest area of contractual spend, and also has a massive impact on our residents' lives. So that's why we're bringing those items, but it's a fair challenge. And I think once the recommendations we spoke about earlier with Mark are embedded, these will come to you in a very different way.
Thank you. Okay, 2 hands. I didn't see who went up first, so I'll let Councillor Madden.
Thank you. First of all, thank you very much for a really interesting report. And also, I'd just like to say a massive thank you to both to you and to Dan for everything that you've done on Gatehouse so far. We're not quite there yet, but we're nearly there. We're doing so well with it. And the feedback has been really positive about that, so that's great. I've got a couple of questions. I'll do them in a different order from my original intention, because first of all, following on from what Darren's just said, I'm really interested in what you said about the Grenfell thing and the fact that they sort of criticised the fact that members didn't know enough about it. My question on that would be, but what would had the members known more about it, what would they have been able to do that was different? What would that have created a different outcome? Because it's all very well giving us information, but if we don't know what to do with it, then what's the point? Does that make sense? So that would be my first question. And I'll just ask the other one as well. I'm also interested in, with this safety aspect, what do we do when we've got a building that might have a couple of leasehold, for instance, Gate Tower, I'm not being parochial, it is a good example, where you've got 40 flats and 2 of them are leasehold and the rest are council housing stock. What happens to those properties? I know for a fact that you've put new front doors on those, but other than that, I don't know. Does the council have any responsibility for buildings over 18 metres tall in the borough that are not council properties? So they might be housing association or they might be privately owned. So that's my little bundle of questions for you.
Thank you.
Shall I start?
Sorry, kind of thrown that all over there, haven't I?
If I start on the question you asked about Grenfell and the role of scrutiny committees,
yeah.
I think the issues that were raised there were around the residents' voice, because the criticism there was that residents were making complaints about that their legitimate concerns were not being addressed, and therefore scrutiny committees like this are a very useful way of being able to channel that resident voice, be advocates on behalf of residents around the experiences they are receiving. So I think that's the point I would sort of emphasise there. On private sector blocks, we do have responsibilities, enforcement responsibilities, jointly with the fire brigade around private sector blocks, and our private sector team, housing team, do monitor and work with freeholders around high-rise buildings in the private sector, and we will provide advisory guidance to those building owners, and we may also serve regulatory notices if that is appropriate in order to facilitate those remediation works happening. So there are a number of high-rise buildings in the private sector, and we do monitor those to the private sector team, and that is something that we could report back here as a separate report. So there's a different approach there because we're not the building owners, but we do have statutory enforcement powers, and we work closely with the fire brigade around liaison with those building owners.
Can I just clarify something on that? And when you report that back to us, would that be identifying those buildings? I know there's at least one more in my ward. So we would know and understand where what the position is on those buildings as well that are privately owned, rather than just a general report. So they're going to be identified.
Yes, I mean they will be identified by address. I mean it would be, there's a small number because of the type of borough we are, of private sector buildings that are over 18. So you would probably know what they are anyway, but we would list the addresses of the buildings that we are actively tracking and monitoring.
Lovely, thank you.
Just on that, councillor, so I mentioned the Building and Resident Safety Management Board. very quickly in that presentation, but that is private rented sector come to that meeting, they present a report on all those buildings over 18 metres. If there's any live cases, any enforcement actions, we do have that information, and that's also attended by Herts Fire Rescue Service, that meeting. So yeah, we do have the information and can share it with the group.
Can I just add, Chair, that one of the other things that we will do is we will provide advice and guidance around applying for funding support as well.
Okay.
We will also help and assist and support where there is government funding available to building owners to remediate their buildings.
Brilliant.
I want to ask a question on leaseholders.
Yes.
I think that was in there.
Yes, that was in there.
Yeah.
That was the other bit.
Why do you have to bring up leaseholders? It is challenging. It is challenging because the terms of the lease will define what they're responsible, what we're responsible for, and we've actually got legal advice and gone down the path of flat entrance doors, for instance. Even if it says they're responsible, we'll ask them to if they can provide certification to confirm that is a 30-minute fire-rated door installed by a competent contractor. We'll take that. If they can't, we're going to replace the door and recharge it as a service charge.
Okay.
It's a critical part of life saving in those buildings. Unfortunately, what happens behind that front flat entrance door is a little bit beyond our power. If a leaseholder is privately renting, then they'll still need to be carrying out landlord's gas safety checks, electrical tests. But if it's an owner-occupier living there, like anyone else in their own home, that legislation isn't there yet to say you have to do it. So again, another reason why that flat entrance door is such a crucial part of building safety.
That's really hard, isn't it?
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, so I've just had, sorry, yes, okay.
What's next? My question was actually for the portfolio holder. My question was going to be, were they planning to take this paper to Cabinet? Because if that is where it will end up, and I don't know if officers can nod me that this paper will go to Cabinet.
At the moment, it's not the intention to take the paper to Cabinet because it's a briefing, it's not a decision item.
So Cabinet members won't see it in some shape?
So the portfolio holder for housing and property services will see it and is regularly briefed on all the things that are in this report. But it wouldn't specifically go to Cabinet unless there was a decision that was required from it.
Okay. So my comment was that the recommendation should be none arising from this report to noted.
Councillor Stevens.
Correct. The tenant's voice, let's come back to that one. Your reference here about TPAS, and you're hosting 4 discovery sessions in December. How did that go, and what have we learned, and what is it going to add to our toolkit?
Yes, we did 2 in December in the end and 2 in January, because the attendance was fairly low. I guess December's a busy month for a lot of people, and we were asking for people to take time out of their busy lives. The attendance on the tenant workshops, I can't confirm numbers right now. We're hoping to get 40 tenants across the 2 sessions. I think we've got about 25, but again, I can confirm numbers. And we really, we hit the tower blocks hard. We were knocking on doors, we were putting out social media, we were sending things down. So yeah, but those people that did attend had some really useful insights, and we are pulling that information. We've done 2 employee workshops last week. So again, we're putting that all together to move forward. So that is a really interesting, exciting piece of work, which not sure what comes to this scrutiny, it was a committee anymore, but it might be something we can certainly update the committee on at a later date and the outcome of that exercise and what it looks like.
Thank you. I should have said it. Good report.
Thank you.
Thank you. Were they all the questions?
Can I just add something to what Garrick's just said? What Garrick's just raised, please. Interesting when you say about going and knocking on doors and things like that. Is there ever any communication between officers and the local councillors when you're going to go and do something like that? Because for me, I would really like to go out with the officers on something like that. I think it would be great for the residents.
I think that's really good, and just sitting here today, yeah, that kind of penny's dropped a little bit. You know some of the residents better than we do.
Oh, I'm very passionate about
so no, I think, and again,
the high-rise blocks in my book.
And the whole point of the resident engagement strategies is it will kind of make commitments from us in how often we're going to be communicating and how we're going to communicate. So we'd really appreciate your feedback. So yeah, we'll definitely loop the ward councillors in for those conversations.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll move on to item 10. Sorry? So, well, it was for noting, so yeah. Okay, so we'll move on to item 10, which is responsive repairs update. And yeah, you've heard the whole meeting, so yeah, we'll take it that the papers are read, but obviously if you want to provide.
Absolutely. So I'm Dan Thurley, Head of Asset Management. I'm going to introduce Sean Kennedy. Sean is Cardo's account manager, so effectively my counterpart in Cardo. Sean is based in Cardo's office on Maxted Road in Hemel, so knows our account very well. The paper is around the improvements we've made, but I don't want to shy away from, most of you will know from the contact you have from residents, is there still are too many individual issues that go wrong. And so I don't want to move away from that, but this is around how are we moving, so on aggregate, those number of issues are reducing and getting easier for the people that are living in our properties. So our most significant improvement we've made is the reduction in the number of open jobs. So a 42% reduction from April up until the end of, pretty much till the end of December, because the numbers have only reduced by about another 50 on that. And it's really important to us because that's 42% fewer people that have got a reason to contact us and chase us and say, why haven't you done my repair? And we're getting things moved through. But it also is important because for the call centre to deal with those calls, it gives them more time to do proactive work rather than just reacting or chasing for something. Under 2.6, you would have seen the graph. And one of the things that's very noticeable in the graph is those upticks, and they are weather related. So we can see that heavy rain we had towards the end of September, which was really significant in terms of the number of extra jobs we came. I think we pretty much found every roof leak possible in Hemel through that weather that we had though. So albeit it created a really challenging circumstance, in some other ways, it was really good because it showed us even roofs that were fairly robust, if they were going to leak, they leaked. So we got quite a lot of good information from that. And we're at a point now where we're recovering back from the workload that put in. First time fix to us is really important for two reasons. So one is absolutely our number one driver for customer satisfaction. If we get the first time fix right, customer satisfaction is always in the 90%, so the low 90s, 91, 92%. If we don't get the first time fix right, it's through the floor. There's some degree where we can save it if we can make a follow-up appointment on the day and say, we're sorry, can't fix this now, but we can come back and do that a little bit. But first time fix there is the driver. But in terms of the commercial side of it, it's far cheaper for us to go out, fix it once and go away, and then we can move on to another job rather than that operative having to come back then and spend twice the amount of time doing that work. There are, of course, some element of the jobs that cannot be fixed first time. Now, we measure all jobs, so this isn't jobs that are fixable first time. So some things have to be measured and something ordered, something has to wait for drying time, that you can't ever fix it first time. So our measure, unlike what other people in the industry might do, is where they will just select only things that can be measured first time. We measure absolutely everything. And now that our WIP is reducing, we'll spend more time focusing on those jobs that weren't fixed right first time and actually understanding what can we do differently to keep driving that bit down. For complaints, so we're not seeing any reduction in the number of stage 1 complaints that we receive. We are seeing a change in the profile of those complaints in terms of why people are contacting us. So beginning of April, as you could imagine, with that really high amount of work that was outstanding, a lot of very, very late jobs, people were saying, well, why don't you do my repair? That then, as that closed down, they were starting to move on to some of the quality issues around those repairs. We've virtually eradicated complaints related to quality issues, and that's mainly using CX feedback. So we will review every single survey response that comes in. If they have an issue with the quality of the repair, we immediately can follow that up. That system is working quite well enough that I think we're having one or two every few months around a quality issue that's coming in. In terms of the complaint handling, what we've been successful at is reducing the stage 2 escalations. So partly because our response to the stage 1 is correct. And I think I was here a couple of months ago, and I think I mentioned that one of the reasons that we had some late stage 1 complaints going out is because
we just won't let a bad response go out. It's got to be the right response. So we're getting those responses correct, and so people aren't escalating immediately, but also we're tracking the actions and the commitments we had. Because effectively, we only have 2 complaints. It's I asked you something, you didn't do it, or you said you'd do something and you didn't do it. And so by tracking those complaints, we're following that through. When I wrote this report, the projection was 9, actually ended up in 10 complaints that came in for quarter 3, and we've had 1 so far this month. So we're consistently pushing those stage 2 complaints down, which is obviously having an impact on Ombudsman escalations too. So that part of it is working. For resident satisfaction, now we have had some IT issues which were fixed, and unfortunately in January they've also gone down. And so the resident satisfaction figures here are based on when a job's complete, we send that satisfaction survey out, and the resident has a choice to fill the survey in or not. So it is a self-selecting sample. So these figures are lower than the sampling that we do when we will ring someone up and just say, can you tell us about your repair experience? But pretty much each month we're seeing that increase, and we will work with Cadre in terms of fixing that IT integration and getting that bit working. For resident satisfaction, if you don't mind, I'll just jump on the AI bit. I didn't put this in there, but for the future of AI in repairs will be around the repair reporting part and that customer journey. So most housing organisations will try to channel shift people to get them to report online rather than a call centre. And to be honest with you, that decision is normally driven by their finance team because the transaction price is much, much lower. It's not actually cheaper because the quality of what you're getting is really bad, because you can't be a human being asking questions and talking to someone and actually getting to what the real reason is to it. The benefit of AI now is you can replicate that really well. They can ask really good follow-up questions and do what they need to properly diagnose that repair at a time whenever the resident wants to do it. The benefit for us will be is you can report something that could then go onto the system, check, has it got an asbestos survey? No, it hasn't. Right, let's get that order straight away. It can schedule in works. It can do all the other things. It can even read the asbestos survey and make sure it's got the part of the property that you're doing the repair in there. It can order materials. It can do lots and lots of things that will then free up our team to do the things that people are good at and focus on that more. Now, I'd say that we're probably about 3 years away before we roll that out, and we're very likely to do that through our repairs partner rather than doing it in-house. But that's pretty much where the technology is in the repairs, and I think it will have a big impact on customer satisfaction. Damp and mould is undoubtedly our most challenging work stream that we have. So we have 2 dedicated damp and mould surveyors. They are managing at the moment just over 300 cases, and so communication's difficult. Making sure that we've got the right actions in place can be very, very challenging. So how we're managing those risks is very much focusing on triage. And so the triage now focuses as much on the people living in the property than it does the property. So who is there? Are they vulnerable? Is the damp and mould going to impact their health or their well-being? And in those cases, we're escalating it quickly, and we're getting those works done on a sort of an urgent basis. We've got a lot of work going into finding the silence. So with Ricky's team, with Aaron Servicing going out, Aaron Service go out to do a servicing, they do a damp and mould inspection. And so we've almost had their contract for a whole year. So once we got that, combined with the stock condition data that we have, we'll also do a damp and mould inspection, combined with all the reports of damp and mould we've got. We'll put that in to create a profile of where our damp and mould is within our stock, and that will focus partly on archetypes, partly on geographical location, and if we can, around household data, and really understand, well, who is most likely to be affected by damp and mould. We'll use that data to inform our planned maintenance programme. So what we do will vary depending on what the right solution is for that particular circumstances, but it could be, for example, where we've got blocks that have got temporary accommodation, perhaps they're north-forward facing walls on those particular flats, that we may just increase the ventilation in those properties to make sure that they're less likely to get damp and mould. So some of it could be quite simple solutions. Others, it might be where we focus more when we're doing installation upgrades and that type of work, and that we try to focus money more there where it's going to have that greatest impact. There are, of course, lots of competing demands over other things that we would do. But essentially, the focus on damp and mould has been get our response to reporting right, find the silence now, and then our next step is around being preventative rather than reacting to damp and mould. And then, of course, we're currently preparing for the new contract, and so we've looked at everything that works really well with the Cardo contract and everything that we think we can improve on and we would want to do differently, either in retrospect or just because things have moved on a huge amount. In the 11 years ago, we awarded the Cardo contract, so things have changed, and so we're looking to change and make sure that's counted.
Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Madden.
Yeah, it's a comment really rather than a question. I've had several instances in over the last few months, not just as a borough councillor, but when I've been working alongside borough councillors as the county councillor, where we've got complex needs with a resident and they've got problems with their council property and everything. And I would just like to say that I wouldn't say the service that we've had has been good. I'd say it was outstanding. Dan and his team have been absolutely outstanding, and I just want that recognised. So thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments, Councillor Adeleke?
Thank you very much, Dan, for your report. I think it's good to note that satisfaction level is going up, and then complaints are coming down. My question is on the damp and mold. I think going back about 3-4 years now, there was a big outcry in the country about it, all over, not just here, and it seems to have, gone down almost completely. Is that the case with us? And with the amount of new buildings we've got now coming up in our being built by the council, do we find that the need for repairs, complaints, maintenance, and so on and so forth are being limited because the accommodation, the quality of accommodation we have now is much more improved than, say, 3-5 years ago?
For me, address the new build part first. I mean, we don't get many repair requests from our new build, but by virtue that it's brand new, you wouldn't expect those components to be failing at this stage. There obviously are always some repairs that go on. In terms of the quality, so yeah, lessons have been learned quite significantly. So take damp and mould as an example. What we did is we wanted to insulate properties as much as possible, stop drafts, and lots of things focused around that. But what I did is it trapped moisture inside the property, and it created damp and mould. And probably almost every housing provider has been guilty of it historically, of doing those improvements with the best of intentions, but having that consequence. And it probably leads on to the point you make around damp and mould being more in the public eye. And effectively, I think as an industry, our approach to it was disgusting. People would call and say, I've got mould in my home, and the industry response was, well, that's your problem. That's a lifestyle issue. That's you causing it. Go and fix it yourself. Now, the reality is for the people that live in our properties, heating it is expensive. They're going to struggle to put the heating on all the time that they need to. They're often going to be facing overcrowding that's there, and they're often going to be facing that we've put double glazing in, and we've done all these other things, whereas 30 or 40 years ago, they'd have a different type of window that would be a bit drafty, and you wouldn't get that damp and mould. So we're seeing, so perhaps in the press, the damp and mould parts is closing down. But in terms of the residents' eyes, it's not. It's far more on their agenda. People are a lot more aware that they can report damp and mould. So we're still seeing an increase in the number of repairs that we have. So last year we did 27,000 repairs roughly. I think this year we've fallen around 29,000, and a lot of that is because of the increase on damp and mould. remedying damp and mould is far more expensive than the average repair. So if somebody has mould, it takes, to do it really well, it generally takes 3 visits. Sometimes we can do it in 2 visits, depending on the circumstance. But sending somebody out 3 times, paying for the chemicals they've got and everything else to do it can add up on price, as well as then addressing the underlying issue that they've got. We're also seeing that because people know that damp and mould is such high profile, and you see it in the complaints. So most of our complaints about damp and mould aren't, I've got damp and mould, I want you to fix it. It's I've got damp and mould, so you should move me to a new home. I've got damp and mould, so you should give me a new kitchen, a new bathroom. And people are more than aware. And I'm not saying that they shouldn't be getting moves or they shouldn't get a kitchen, because on the whole, yeah, they've got a very old kitchen, it needs renewal, but people will play on that. And our biggest challenge in terms of that is around disrepair. So at the moment, we get targeted by people knocking on doors saying, you've got any outstanding repairs? Great, I'll pass you on to the solicitor, and they're pushing it. So the vast majority of our disrepair cases are just like the smallest, bit of mould there that we don't even know about, and anything else that comes with it. But the solicitor's advice to them will be, close your windows, don't ventilate, make sure the problem gets worse. And so we end up, something that's very easy for us to fix, we end up really, really struggling to get through. And for the resident's perspective, actually, they don't get very much from that. But the solicitor, who charges every time they send a letter and everything else like that, can build up their fees quite significantly. And I think that's where, sort of culturally, where the damp and mould stuff is for us at the moment. But people are very aware of it, and I'm pleased that people are aware of it, because we want people to live in a healthy home. And to a certain degree, I want to write to everyone and say, tell us if you've got damp and mould, and we'll come and fix it. Part of the problem we've got in terms of reducing the WIP and addressing other things like that is it spends all of the budget. And so if I don't open it up to everybody, we'll get more of an influx than we can currently do. So where we're looking at the sort of the finding, the silence, stuff like that drip feeds into that work. One of our considerations in terms of the next phase of reaching out to public to get them to report more stuff to us is to start talking to healthcare workers, so GP surgeries, for example, and giving them a referral route. So if they had a patient, for example, that had respiratory issues and they think their home may be a contributing factor to it, well, let us know. We'll send a surveyor to do a healthy homes check, and we'll look at that. And so we'll slowly build up to making sure we've captured everybody who possibly could have damp and mould.
Please, can I just follow with a supplementary comment?
You can.
Thank you very much. I just want to follow Councillor Jan Madden on the comment that she made earlier on, just to say thank you very much to you and your team. One of my residents in Bovenden, Board of Chipperfield, had damp and mold problem, and they were very pleased with the way you came in, put them in an hotel for about 2 weeks or something like that, and repaired the place, painted it. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much for your report and the answers you've given so far. I just wanted to, I think it's great that the numbers are coming down. I just wondered, on the chart, figure 1, presumably that's just number of cases on the right-hand scale. So it was 2,800, it's fallen to 1,700. Is there a time that's linked to that? So when you had 2,800, what were those people waiting? What was their waiting time before it was fixed? And
yep. So
has that changed?
Yes. So
It has. Yeah.
I don't have the figure for March. I've got the figure for the end of April, so it's slightly off from that. But at that point, there were 507 cases over 90 days. There were 158 cases between 61 to 90 days. And then there were 181 from 31 to 60, 1,566 from 0 to 30 days. So at the end of December, that's moved. In terms of over 90 days, that's 189 cases. And those cases are predominantly backlog roofing cases. So that's where in terms of our work stream that's challenging in terms of where that work is there. They are cases though, so what we manage very closely is live leaks. So we would go and do a temporary repair, and we aim to get that temporary repair done within 7 days of it being reported. Now, we certainly weren't there last April for that, but at the moment, that's working, and I'd say the indication it's working is we're not getting reports around collapsed ceilings and the things that you would think would happen had we not been getting those leaks fixed. So that part of it is working. And at the moment we manage roofing incredibly tightly because we know that works from there. So we have a weekly meeting. It's actually gone well enough now that we're probably going to move that to every 2 weeks, although Sean and his team are still going to meet every week and go through that. And essentially what we do is a very basic thing is, these are all the cases. What's the next action? Has that been arranged? Have they got an appointment? Have we got an asbestos survey? Whatever it is, are we actually following it through? Does the quote need approved? And Steve, who's our responsive repairs manager, every job over £500 is going to him to review now to make sure that the right actions are being taken, and we're getting that. So at the end of December, 61 to 90 days is 183 cases. 31 to 60 days is 252 cases. And 0 to 30 was 993 cases. So each of them come down, although there are still lots of cases where they shouldn't be, and they're the ones that we're managing as tight as we can to keep bringing that down. And I think this programme, in terms of these really old cases, will keep going until March before we can get that in the place where we want it to be.
Okay, thank you. Can I ask a supplementary? So,
Thank you.
Moving on from that, there's a cost attached to what you've done, which is great. Is that an identified cost? Is it something that we know how much it is? And presumably it's partly cost, but partly cultural change. And I haven't sat on this committee long enough to have, if you've already had a report about the handover from Osborne to Cardo, so maybe this has already been discussed, but I would be, given that you effectively bought the company, presumably it's the same staff. So what changes have you been able to make? Or is it just that you're being paid, the paying you more to do it? Or is there a cultural change in what's been going on? Because obviously previously there were a lot of issues with Osborne. And from what I'm hearing, just to follow on finally, what I'm hearing from you, when you talk about retendering, are we retendering to just are we completely retendering, or is it just that it's going to be extended again, the contract?
So is it okay if I invite Sean to answer the question about the Osborne Cardo takeover, and I'll take the other points?
Yeah, sorry, obviously hi everyone. We did obviously take over OPSL, and the majority of the staff are the same staff. There has been a cultural change within the business, as you know. We try to impact change, more team environment, be more passionate about what we do, put the residents at the heart of what we do, and that's an impact that has paid dividends for us. And then working together in partnership and as a team with Dan and his team to understand all the needs of everyone, rather than just thinking about perhaps what was just one straight line previously. So I think that's where the culture has come from, and it has paid dividends, as you can see, and we're still striving to do that. Still more lessons to be learned and improvements to be made, but they will come, and that will continue.
Thank you. Any further comments?
If I address the other points, so I reassure we absolutely do not pay them anymore, and there's a constant drive with us in terms of looking at value for money. I hope Sean will tell you we're not an easy client, because we will benchmark our costs, what Cardo are charging, and we'll come to them and say, well, actually, look, why are they paying this, and what's different from it, and we'll keep trying to push those prices down. The cost of our WIP reduction, so obviously 1,200 extra jobs that we wouldn't have otherwise paid for this time last year that need paying for, has had an impact on the budget, and in particular the profile of those jobs has an impact. So a lot of them are roofing jobs that were just backlogged, and we still got some of them in there, and by their nature they're more expensive than a small standard repair work. So the budget is challenging. I do work very closely with Ricky, and he did have some spare money that he was able to pass over to us in terms of helping balance that. So the overall budget doesn't get impacted, but we work as a team very closely, and so we'll work together to make sure that collectively we don't overspend. Most of our budget savings in terms of balancing it have come at the moment through reductions in our spend on voids. So we've changed some of the approach that we had in terms of the standards that were there. So we still hit our published void standard, that doesn't change, but just culturally people were doing more because, say, for example, they may put some stain block on a ceiling and they had a complaint about that particular job. Okay, right now we'll do a full redecoration instead, and where actually maybe there would have been 1 or 2 complaints over a few hundred jobs, and then if you were doing 600 or 700 voids where you're completely redecorating a room, those costs go up. So we've cut back to our published void standard. We haven't reduced it beyond either what we're legally required to do or what the Core and Borough Council says that we would do on our voids. But from the responsive repair side, that's where most of our savings are coming from. We have put on hold where we've had blown windows, so where you get the condensation inside, because they actually have a very, very minimal impact on the energy efficiency, because it's only replacing argon gas with air. We don't have vacuum sealed double glazed units, and so some of them can actually be quite expensive, so if you have to get scaffold for some of them and to do that. So we've put those ones on hold. We've got about 70 of them on hold at the moment that we're releasing in April to help manage that budget. I think, did that answer everything?
It certainly gives a flavour of how you're balancing it. So thank you. Yes.
Yeah, just to add, it's a full retendering exercise.
Sorry.
It's a full retendering exercise, just to pick up your other question.
Yes, sorry, that was my other
live.
question. Yeah, sorry, you're right, that was my last one.
Okay, so that report was for noting, and noted. So, thank you very much. We'll call the meeting to a close.